Hello, everybody. Welcome to my video of a rhetorical analysis on a UX industry blog article. We're going to be looking at what it does well, the genre conventions it follows or breaks, and the purposes it serves for its audience. So when we're looking at the genre of a blog article, there's some conventions that most of them follow. So for instance, they typically have a conversational tone, a little bit less formal writing style. They have compelling titles, something that catches your eye because there are a lot of different digital blog articles and just articles online. So it's something that you should be able to notice in a search query. It's got a niche focus, again, sort of differentiating it, making it unique on the topic that it's covering. It should have a clear structure and visuals, so sort of a visual organization that makes it easy to take in and interesting to the eye of maybe a somewhat disinterested reader just kind of scrolling over the internet. There should be hyperlinks. Those help with the sort of optimization and accessibility of the article, as well as just making it more likely to be accessed from various different points. It's usually got some sort of call to action at the end of the article. This could be a variety of different things. Maybe the article is telling you to buy a product also on the website that the article is released on, or to follow a link or do some other simple action that they want to have convinced you to do by the end of the article. And lastly, it should be really concise. So let's look at this specific article by Humanity Centered and see how they achieve that. So when we look at the rhetorical situation here, it's kind of unique because this article itself was written by the founder of the website Humanity Centered and the movement. So it's sort of the epitome of her beliefs as the founder. This particular article speaks on designers facing burnout and how they can avoid that in their professional lives. So when we see how she's addressing, even in the title, what you're not doing as a UX designer, definitely she's speaking to the designers themselves who are feeling a little bit of that overload as they do their work. However, it's also clear based on just the intro to her website as you navigate to this blog post, you're going to see what she's advocating solutions for corporate trainings, for employer information sessions that are going to help employers support their UX designers in this way. And to that end, she's trying to convince UX professionals of the need to prioritize self-care, which is central to the ideas of humanity-centered. This aligns again with Vivian Castillo's whole mission with this website. So it's a very unique rhetorical situation, I think, to look at. When we're looking at what this document does in a genre, there's a lot of different types of blog posts. They really fulfill sort of any and every niche you could ever hope for. But this specific one, I think, is filling a very necessary niche in this UX design blogging genre. There's a lot of different digital resources out there for UX designers, as we're just a very designy, technical, technology sort of minded group. So that considered, this blog post takes a different tone. So there's a lot of different tones or a lot of different articles talking about mental health in general, but this one shifts that industry focus on the product and the process. You usually see blog articles telling you, oh, how to be more efficient here, how to make sure your process is smoother there. But this one's talking about the people of the UX design, and that is really core to the humanity-centered goal, right? Is to talk about the developers of those genres, which I think is mentioned in the readings as, I really love the term power users. They're not just people, looking up how to write a business memo and copying it. They're creating a piece of writing that fills the needs of the exigence that called for it. UX designers and technical writers do that every day. So it's a really good opportunity to see sort of the behind the scenes and the personal of that very technical work. When we look at the different rhetorical elements of this piece of writing and just how in the text the author accomplishes those goals that we looked at, there's obviously the three different elements of the traditional rhetorical triangle, as well as kairos that we need to look at. So for pathos, I think blog articles usually are pretty strong in this department. There's usually that gentle humor. I believe the author opens up with a description of a bad day she had as a designer herself, and just, I'm having one of those days, quote unquote. So there's a little bit of gentle humor, maybe even a little bit of gentle self-deprecation on the author's part that sort of makes it really relatable as it opens. It makes it easy for the reader to step into that message that she then gives you a call to action with at the end. She also uses a lot of we and our pronouns when discussing the UX design industry, so you feel included. You feel like she's really pulling you into the discussion and giving you consideration as a member of that discussion, which is very strategic on her part. She also addressed reader concerns. I'm going to bring up an example of where she does that later. But just the personal tone and the consideration for the reader, very strong throughout all of this, which makes sense considering that she herself is, dabbled in psychology, research, and content writing. She knows her stuff and how to speak to that audience, right? So on that note, the ethos here, not only does she cite psychologists and articles, and I think even at one point, a famous actor and film developer who had a really good quote about just that feeling of burnout you get. But she herself is the founder of this website and really puts her heart and her career behind the topics that she's discussing. In this specific article, I think is really emblematic of her belief. So the ethos is really strong in that sense as well. And then the logos, I think just a very logical flow from the personal story of the struggle that we all have to do our work throughout the day, and then wrapping up with ways to make that easier in a very flowing manner, in a very pragmatic manner, I would argue. She's trying to prove that UX designers have to be attuned to their senses for work, so they shouldn't neglect their own feelings as humans. And I think that logical argument makes a lot of sense. It's sort of the idea that you can't pour from an empty cup. And so even if you're only caring about your career and not yourself, you have to care about, not burning yourself out and being emotionally intelligent as a worker. And then the Kairos, so coming at a time when the culture is focused on emotional intelligence, yet also pressing their workers for higher productivity and less human interaction. That's an element of COVID that we saw occur, and it's just something that continues here, I would say, even through COVID. So when we look specifically at the moves that the author made to both fit into this genre and serve her audience, but also set herself apart in the genre, we can see some really unique things. So the visual elements are definitely there. I think it was really effective in the sense that blog articles need to be multimodal. So she's got, bright colors, beautiful, very modern designs, custom made for this article, I might add. And then she's also got videos. So you can go and watch a very accessible 10-minute TED Talk about burnout, imposter syndrome, issues you may have as a worker, as a person, and a professional. She also uses a lot of metaphor in her writing. So we actually have two, and they both have images associated with them. The first is this guy with the big mouth right here. So this is actually a visual depiction of the sensory attention given by the human brain to our bodies. So you have parts of you that are much more sensitive, like your hands, your mouth, etc. And this is used to just show that UX designers are always hyper focused on these elements of our experiences as humans. So we need to be careful that we don't fry those nerves and that we don't rely so much on ourselves to be like robots and produce and understand and sense without also taking care of ourselves. And then the second metaphor is this one of the four horsemen. This is sort of a biblical, historical metaphor of the idea that there's some things that are going to bring doom if you don't attend to them, right? So, four in particular, she mentions as things that you need to do to sort of take inventory and take care of yourself as a person, or else things will go wrong in your career. Here's that disclaimer that she had. She mentioned that she's trying to avoid alienating some of her audience here by after speaking about how there's a lot of argument and often a lot of tense discussion in UX design. She says, disclaimer, I don't mean to diminish the value of conversations and training around methodologies, semantics, etc. They're important and have their place in the spaces and industries we work in. So that's her literally acknowledging audience concerns to bring them back in and say, hey, I've thought of you. It really adds to both ethos and pathos, I would argue. Then we've got little modular, almost like educational bits sort of sprinkled throughout here in her design of this article. There's bolded things like mindful moments and challenges. Talk about a call to action. She literally is challenging the reader to do something. Here, in this case, it's to choose themselves and to commit to taking care of themselves and not minimizing their experiences. So just thinking as a teacher how I would apply this, I would really ask students to think about genre theory. We would break it down, obviously, and be talking about how and why a genre is produced and not just view it as a template and something to copy and paste. So I would ask a lot of questions. We would have these texts in front of us and ask things like, how well does the blog adapt the traditional informative article genre to a digital platform? And then we would also talk about how multimodal elements like the text, those hyperlinks, the videos affect audience engagement and strategically why they're placed at different parts in the article, for instance. And then we would talk about what characteristics of the writing might be especially valuable to this specific audience. So it's a really unique audience, right? These people are designers themselves. Maybe they're tired, they're burnt out, they're looking for some comfort, some advice, but they're also really savvy about design, and they're going to notice if this article is not designed well. So that's something that the author had to consider in her writing. So as I was analyzing this myself, I thought of some things that I could do to help teach this to students. I really learned that I need to emphasize the layered literacies that we can acquire while discussing text. There's so many things that converge and come into making a good piece of writing, and it's never just cut and dry, black and white sort of thinking. So having students think about the layers of power and language and knowledge that go into one particular writing event is really important since when we're in a writing classroom, it can seem very isolated and we're just looking at the thing in front of us. But really, that is a product, right, of all these other things. That's like how we're learning about the texts are products of an ecosystem. So we want to promote genre awareness as well as, audience and rhetorical situation awareness of students rather than teaching them to copy genres. And then lastly, I think it's really important to illustrate how little deviations in genre conventions are almost more valuable to look at and analyze than well-copied, reproduced versions. So ones that break the mold a little bit are great for us to look at as a class and decide, was this effective and how did this change come about, right? Because that's how things evolve and are created. We want to be those power users of genres, and participate in the, sort of logical creation of this text makes sense to be this way because why? So I think that's a great thing to focus on in teaching this sort of rhetorical analysis. And I know that it could really deepen just the conversations we have in class about all the different genres we come across. Here's a couple of my sources. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to hearing your feedback and really appreciate you checking it out.